Hi, everyone. Yeah, I try to contextualize a little bit my understanding of governance. I would be curious to hear from you what role it plays in your life and why you ended up in the field you are working on. For me, just to introduce myself quickly, I live and work here in Berlin. I'm co-founder of Supermarkt, which is a community space and platform that is dedicated to work and research and community building on the intersection of money, society, governance, and digital media, if you wish. So there's this peculiar field that we are working in since almost 10 years. Apart from that, I'm very closely tied to the platform cooperativism community, which is a movement that started off in New York 4 years ago as a reaction to the emerging platform economy as a sort of antidote to platform capitalism. It's this idea of platform cooperativism. So let's create something together that is based on cooperative work. And we'll hear more about that from Stacko later. I just want to give you a brief idea on why I'm so much interested in the topic, because I believe with each of you there's a personal story also that led you to the place you're in today. And I'd love to hear more about that. So for me personally, when I ask myself, okay, how did I end up researching and discussing governance? Why is that a topic for me today? And Phoebe said soft governance. It's actually true, but sometimes it's not that soft to me. Sometimes it also feels pretty tough figuring out how to work together with communities and trying out ways to make stuff happen together over different countries and jurisdictions. Creating spaces for collective work is not soft at all. It's actually really complex. And that's also what I figured within Supermarkt. And sometimes for me, it's like as if Supermarkt would be a platform to really tackle complexity in social relations and collaboration. But coming back, why I'm interested in the topic, I grew up in a tiny village in the south of Germany. And I think it was one of the few pockets where, there were not many cars, not many private phones in the houses. I know it sounds a little bit odd, but it really was like that. So a lot of the land and the facilities there were owned in cooperatives. So we had a baking house and a milk house and a super big public fridge where we put all the meat and stuff. So I grew up in a 4-generation household run by women in 4 generations, and I realized that our entire life was based on governance, like everything we've done, taking care of all the resources together, making decisions on how to use stuff. That has been part of our daily lives, and there were so many things that needed to be negotiated, and it was primarily about the use of common resources, how they get used, who is taking what choices. So this needed to be constantly moderated. And I think, in a sense, I grew up with that. And then I've noticed that around the end of the 1980s and starting of 1990s, there was something absolutely changing. And that was when the neoliberal agenda emerged and then really kicked in also into this village I grew up with. And within a few years, people abandoned farming. They sold the land because it happened that the automotive industry in Stuttgart really needed to have more workers and they needed more land for people to settle down there. So this little village today, you wouldn't recognize it anymore. It's a sleeping city for people working for the industry. And so it's basically all gone. And I'm not saying that all of it was good, because actually a lot of it was pretty tough, like especially this governance aspect. But I think that with the work I'm doing with Supermarkt, with different communities, and also with communities in blockchain, I think I'm constantly asking myself, where did all of that go? And is there a way maybe to reinvent some of it? So I have the feeling that today we are very often looking again for, okay, what's our notion today of the commons? How can we govern things together? How can we engage, or how can we cultivate a collective decision making? Because if we talk about governance, I sometimes have the feeling a lot of people take it for granted as if it would be something that, you know, some particular knowledge that you can buy, or as if it would be something that you can acquire through a consultant. But actually it's not. It's really, I realize that the more I work in that field, the more I look into a void where I see, okay, we absolutely don't know much about it, right? Because the knowledge that we acquire in governance is not the knowledge that we, like, you know, this regular idea of knowledge acquisition where you just learn, but it needs to be experienced and negotiated, and that's what makes it so complex. So I think Supermarkt was founded at a moment in time when it was after the financial crisis. It was the moment when big data and cloud computing and then the rise of the sharing economy became a thing. And I remember when Uber and Airbnb started around 10 years ago. In the beginning, I really thought, okay, now this is the rise of a new economy, an economy that I want to see happening. And I was very active, and I collaborated with WeShare and other communities. But it didn't even take us 1 year before we realized, oh my God, this is not going in the direction we want to see it. And I think then the next leap we've done with our communities at Supermarkt was engaging in the platform cooperativism movement, which basically tries to look back at this old tradition of cooperatives, as I have been growing up with in my village, where a lot of the land and the resources have been owned by cooperatives and therefore have been in the hands of the members. So platform cooperativism nowadays is trying to sort of to take that, to build on the heritage of cooperatives, but to connect it with the digital economy. And I think this is super interesting. So this, because it sort of, yeah. Oh, 2 more minutes? Okay, yeah. So in one of the biggest challenges I have been facing was helping to build the European branch of Archain, which is a blockchain community, where all of a sudden I have been facing the complexity of thinking cooperative governance and blockchain governance in one thing, which to me was, I mean, this was even more complex. This whole story, for me, I would say, it turned out to be a big fail. We are currently dissoluting the company, so we are wrapping it up. But I have many, many learnings to share why that happened. And yeah, but I'm just afraid my time is up now. But everyone who is interested in hearing my Archain Europe learning story, please let me know, and we can discuss that. Okay, that's it. Yeah. Do you have any questions? In 1 minute. Yeah, it still exists. Archain Europe is, for me, it felt better to wrap it up. But it still exists, and they are hoping to make it to mainnet. I would be really happy about it. But I think there is one thing that we should take into account, and that probably goes for Ethereum as well. There is the Archain cooperative, and there's the community, just as there's the Ethereum Foundation and the community. And I see complexities in really tying these different domains together. And it was one of the issues of Archain as well. Any more questions? No? Okay.
Can you tell more about current development in platform cooperativism? What were the top things this year, for example?
I think one of the top things in platform cooperativism is, I would say, the launch of Fairbnb in, I think, 5 or 6 different European cities. So it's basically the idea that there's a group of people that creates a multi-stakeholder model consisting of housing owners, of local governments, people from the neighborhood, right? So it's not just a company that is taking in all the profits, but this is really about taking into account people living in the neighborhood, asking the community, just looking for creating a culture that is sustainable, and also making sure that taxes are being paid. So I really think that the Fair B&B movement is really one of the super interesting things to witness right now. But there's a lot more. Like Deliveroo has been pulling out of the German market, and the drivers have been informed with 4 days' notice, so they are out of jobs. And now they are trying to found their own platform, cooperative here. And I think that's very promising.
And like, let's assume we have the needed technology, like for DAOs and everything, ready for them. Would that work without the soft governance layer, like internally, like without the culture of governance and responsibility?
Yeah, great question. Certainly not. Certainly not. It wouldn't work without that. And I think it's exactly what we need to build on and develop. Because I think the tech is quite advanced, but it's exactly those mechanisms. The social tech is still underway.
Thank you, Ela.